All right. Well, I want to start by thanking all of you so much for being here with us today. I am honored, truly honored, to introduce you to Wendy Lea. She's the co-founder and CEO of Energize Colorado currently, but she has also done so much more leading up to this point in her career, and we're going to touch on quite a bit of it. So, Wendy, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm excited, and it's great to see so many familiar faces and then a few that I haven't seen in a while, like my friend Kristen Kaufman from Texas. So we have a lot of Coloradans and at least one from Texas. So it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me as well. And, obviously I've gotten to know you a bit over the last couple of years as I volunteered with Energize Colorado. And admittedly, when I first started to talk to you, I was like, oh my God, this is such a badass woman. How am I going to? She's just amazing. And then when I had the opportunity to meet you last fall, when we had the small gathering for the Women on Business segment, I was just struck by how truly genuine and down to earth that you are. And you made everybody there feel so welcomed. And it was just such a nice breath of fresh air. So I want to just say thank you so much for that. And I'm hoping that the people who are here with us today will also get that opportunity to really see a transparent look at what it's like to rise from, pretty much nothing up to the wonderful heights and experiences that you've had in your career. So for those who aren't familiar with Wendy's career, she's worked with everything from big corporations to she's working for an entrepreneur, then becoming an entrepreneur, and then transitioning into being angel investor and board members and CEOs and so much more. And I know there's a lot of details in between those chapters of your career, but with only 1 hour to talk, I'd like to get into more personal side of your success, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Great. So the first really interesting dichotomy that I see in your life is that you come from the small town in rural Mississippi, born and raised. It's the poorest state in the country. It's in the bottom third for education.
Don't be mean to my state. Yeah.
No, I'm not just quoting stats. I actually have somebody who lives in Mississippi, a family member, but it's, you're coming from this, what people would see as a very difficult situation to make any kind of a general living for yourself. And you obviously went gangbusters with your career. My first question to you is, were you always ambitious? I'm thinking back to the meeting and the interview I did with your dear friend, Shirley Archambault, where her book is literally titled Unapologetically Ambitious. Was it always that way for you in your life as well?
I wouldn't probably use the word ambitious, but it's not because I don't like the word. I'm completely down with the word ambitious. I think more I would describe my early motivations as being, I just wanted to be independent. I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't want to be a small business owner. I just wanted to make my own decisions for myself. Maybe that comes from being the oldest child of three siblings. I'm not really sure, but that is a theme that has been clear throughout my life. The need to be independent, to make decisions for myself, to make choices for myself, not always good ones, mind you, but to realize that I was responsible for myself.
So what drove you to actually get out of Mississippi? Was it that desire? Was it kind of the acknowledgement that where you were? Because I'm thinking of so many women in this group who have been in various situations in our life where we just know in our heart and our gut that this is not where I'm supposed to be. And what gave you the courage to strike out on your own, to pursue that feeling?
That's a good question, Sherry. And thanks for asking. At this stage in my life, I do a fair bit of reflection in between Zoom calls. I do plenty of reflection. And so I'm clear now on the strike point, I would say, that created an opportunity for me to leave the state. It really was personal. And, I don't even think of I know Mississippi's at the bottom of the barrel. I was just talking to the chancellor of the University of Mississippi for the first time I ever met a chancellor of the University of Mississippi. And I was like, you need to get with it here. Our state's not doing great. Like, why? I was asking him about how he's using federal stimulus and all that. But so I don't think of myself as being from the poor state or from a rural town. It's interesting. You're just from where you're from. And you do what you do to make progress in your life. But in the case of what took me from Mississippi to the first time living outside of Mississippi was New Orleans, Louisiana, which wasn't that far or that sophisticated, I might add, but really was tragedy. It was just personal tragedy. I was married at 19 while I was in college. My first husband, yes, I've had many. He was killed in a car accident. And when that happened, I just thought, like, what's going on? What's going on with my life? This little life I thought that I had, and it was going to be sweet. And I was going to be a doctor's wife and have 4 kids and live on a country club or whatever my vision was back then. I don't even remember, but I just remember when that happened. And it happens to many people. I mean, I'm not the only one who suffered a personal tragedy. It's kind of part of life. But everything looked different then. Like, now what? And how might I proceed in mainly my professional life? I didn't really imagine what to do with my personal life because I was really sad. But I knew that my professional life was tied to my husband's life because he was going to be a doctor. So I'm like, okay, I don't have to work to put him through school. I now don't have a husband, and do I even need the job I had? So that was a real turning point. And I was in my early 20s, right? He was killed sadly in 1976. That's a long time ago. But I remember so distinctly those decisions. I still wanted to be independent. I didn't want to move away from, I wanted to move towards something else. So those are very different. It's not like, let me move away from this place because it's a hot mess and I don't like it. It's like, okay, now I'm stopping. Now I'm trying to figure out what to move towards. And mainly my thoughts were around professional pursuits.
And so were you drawn at that point to the larger corporations or the smaller corporations?
Yeah, good question. It's a great question because it does take me to big business, small business. So at the time, I was married. I mean, when I got married, I worked for a very large organization, very, very large, and actually loved it. It was General Foods. If anyone knows the CPG industry, they take young college graduates and try to, fix them up and, saw off the tough edges and move them on. And I loved that work. I had a territory, I had a company car. I thought I was on it. However, I was traveling a lot. I was staying in not hotels, but motels because I was calling on grocery stores. Okay, so let's just get clear. I was checking my facings in the store and I was sad. So I'm like, even though I loved my job, and I thought I could be the CEO of General Foods. I mean, really, I guess that is ambition. But I just thought, well, this doesn't feel right now. I don't feel solid. I don't feel secure. I feel confused. And I stopped to go work for a very small business in Jackson, Mississippi, a very small jewelry store, solo entrepreneur. And he had 3 or 4, retail stores. And I ran a mail order business for him, selling sterling silver. Yeah. So think about that. So we placed ads, we took orders, I packed and shipped. I really thought I was a hottie, right? Like a general manager of the mail order business. But that's when I first got exposed to very small businesses. He probably employed 6 people. He owned it 100%. It was very different. It was very different from working for General Foods and being part of a big thing and having lots of rules and regulations. It was very different. And I liked it because while doing that, I learned that business was my art.
So I was going to ask you
Yeah,
that the transition from, because I think there are many in this group as well that did not start off as entrepreneurs, that we worked for corporations. We had, the titles, the offices, the responsibilities, all of that. And it is such a different layout when you go into that small business world. So was that something that instantly drew you in? Did you stay completely in small business or after that?
yeah.
Or did you say, I'm going to go back out to the big business for a while?
No, and this is hopefully will be interesting for those of you on the call, because it shows that, I never went to a career counselor, and I remember my mom or my grandmother saying, maybe you should go to a career counselor. I'm like, what? I'm not sure. I wouldn't even know how to begin to talk to a career counselor. I really didn't. But I do think once I was in that very small business, I really liked being close to the work and to the culture. When I worked for General Foods, I was a remote worker. I didn't go to an office. I went to my customers' offices. I went to distribution sites, right? And then I'd mail in my report. So I wasn't part of a culture. I wasn't part of building that. I was performing a functional area of responsibility, right? And I was good at it, but I had a lot to learn too. And they developed me a lot, which I was grateful for. Small business, very different. I was thrown in. I had very specific role and responsibility. I felt pressured. I felt observed every day because I was. But then after that, a couple of years of that, of course, I thought, well, I should own the store. This is a pattern and not a good one, right? Because I'm like, maybe I should own the store. And then, of course, Mr. Letwinger didn't want me to own the store. It was a family business. He was like, no, you're not going to own my store. I mean, you work for me. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I think I should be the owner. Just in my own mind space, I really saw myself doing that. It was kind of
you were coming into that feeling of you wanted that entrepreneurship. You wanted to own it and run it and do it the way that you wanted to.
Yeah, that's right. But then instead of continuing that path, either in the retail jewelry business or small business sector, you can call it what you want, I ended up then going back to a big company, which was kind of wild and crazy too. I decided to go work for Allstate Insurance Company as an underwriter. And a little of that was I was still healing from all the sadness and just trying to find my way. I didn't know. I was in my 20s and my dreams had been scattered. And so I was popping around in and out. And I thought maybe a corporate job would be good again, to be honest. And it was good too. I got to tell you, I spent 7 years there. I was an underwriter, which was quite a boring job. But I do understand property and casualty insurance now, understand how insurance company operates. Then I got put into their, pool of, management development pool, which was really good for me, right? Because I needed that. Because I was still, as you said, a very small town in Mississippi. I was not a professional. I was making that up, right? I was making that up. I was trying to be polished and do the right thing, but I really didn't know. But I was there for 7 years, and that was a non-trivial journey for me because I worked for, saw and worked for very, very, was at a head office, a regional office, had to go there every day, park, go have lunch and breaks with all these people. It was different. It was very different from General Foods, where I was in my own little car running around with I was very independent.
Right. So how did you grow into all of that? Because I think that's something that entrepreneurs and people watching this call will really relate to is, the saying of entrepreneurs, pretty much you're building the parachute after you've jumped out of the plane,
right on.
Right. And, it sounds like what you're describing is just that, right? You're being thrust into these situations of having to say, yeah, sure, I can do that, no problem. And then you leave the meeting, you're like, oh,
you notice that I still do that to this day.
Right.
I mean,
So
it's
how
not
do you
weird.
help people learn to get that? Where do people turn for the guidance that they need to build those steps? So say, for example, you've got a product that you want to market, but you're not quite sure how to market, but you don't know who to turn to. What are the things that you learned during that part of your life that helped you succeed to your next levels?
Number one, ask for help.
How?
Never was
Where?
afraid to ask for help. Well, wherever I could find it.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it could be friends in my community. It could be people at my church. I was very active in the church back in those days. I mean, I would ask my father, I would ask anyone because I've always been curious. So, and it's not that I've never been afraid. That would be too strong, but I've always managed my fear, right? And which is different than never being afraid. I mean, because I want to know things, I want to dig in, and I like details. I don't like flying high and being way up and kind of bossing people around. I mean, I have to do that, and I've had to do that in plenty of jobs, but I want to know what's going on and why it's happening. So I would learn however I could learn. I'd ask my peers, I'd ask community leaders, I'd ask my father, and I just never was afraid to do that. I knew that I had a lot to learn. I always had a beginner's mind, even before I knew what that meant. And now we're in the world of riches relative to knowledge, right? I mean, you can go anywhere, anytime and learn anything.
Right.
And so for small business owners now who feel isolated or like they don't know everything or where do they go? I mean, there are so many places to go. There are so many mentoring networks to get involved with. There's so many blog posts to read. There's just so many resources. I think the challenge now is which ones make the most sense, where you can derive the most value fast, because I was also very efficient. Because I always had a sense of urgency. Even now I do, it's weird. I never kind of felt like I could just go hang out. And by the way, I regret that a little bit now that I'm closer to 70. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never hung out. I never like went on a holiday, really. I mean, I never really like sat and just noticed things. I'm sorry, I'm not that girl.
I was going to say, you know, the Wendy that I know still has plans up into her 80s of what you want to do for work.
I mean,
so you don't show any signs of slowing down.
No, I don't even think the whole idea of retirement is disgusting to me. And it's not because I don't think it's important. I just think to me, it's just another phase. But back to, where do you go? Well, first of all, you go inside to decide, is that what's important to you? Do you want to learn new things? Not everyone wants to or needs to. You know, I'm one person and I was born wanting to know about new things. And I was managing my fear when I felt like I wasn't good enough or I couldn't go forward. I'd just ask anyone anything, and I would take in little nuggets and I could string them together. But that's my learning style, right? That's my archetype. Not everyone has that learning type. They don't want to be that vulnerable. But you know, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're going to own a business, you're going to have to sit in a pool of vulnerability at one point. The sooner you do it, the better, because you're not born, you don't have all the knowledge you need ever, no matter how old you are.
And I wanted to kind of put a pause on that particular topic, because I know just in the few conversations that we've had, how important your Buddhist upbringing ended up playing into your life, and in the ability to sit still and be introspective, and how you've used that to guide yourself. And I think that there would be a lot of people that would benefit hearing what you do, why you do it, what you get out of it. And if that doesn't necessarily work for someone, what might be other ways to try?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because we're all snowflakes. And so we all have to do different things to center ourselves. I was very, very blessed. I still have an awesome mom. She's 85. She lives in Mississippi, but she was an active Buddhist. And in Mississippi, now let's grok that. And so my friends thought she was a witch, when really She wasn't, she was a Buddhist, but they didn't know any better, right? Because she would sit under a tree with fruit meditating. And it was all weird, even for me, because I didn't love her doing that. I wanted her to be normal. I didn't want her to do that. I wanted her to go to the PTA, please, make some brownies, go to the PTA and show up, right? But that wasn't her jam. And what I learned from her was take it in. Like, just take it in, whatever it is on any given day. Can you notice, observe, soak it in, write it down, but take it in? She taught me that as a very little girl. And I really didn't understand it, except when I started getting bossy, and I'm naturally bossy because I am this independent spirit, right? She goes, now, we don't need to be bossed by you. It would be awesome, she would say, or good. My mother, my very Southern mother, if you could just be still and take it in. And so I would get in my own little corner because I felt like she could be organizing more, being a different mom, better mom, helping us out. You know, I was just always had my finger wagging, and she would just tell me to be calm. And so over the years, it's not that I'm a practicing Buddhist. It is that I have learned through her and many other teachers how to take it in. And for me, it's very different. It could be doing a puzzle. It could be walking my dog. It could be listening to music. It could be reading poetry, which is really my favorite. But whatever I choose, whatever modality, it brings me back to myself and gets me out of my monkey mind of I got to do, I got to be, I got to hurry up. Because over time, that wears one out. It doesn't wear one out in a day. It just wears you out over time. And as a business owner, and many of us, not me, I'm not a parent, but many of you are, you're a wife, a parent, a community leader, you know, you've got all these different roles. And as a business owner, especially during the last couple of years, to find a way to take it in silence and try to stitch together whatever it was that you were observing is really helpful, because otherwise you feel like your head will spin off. Or I should say, I feel like my head will spin off if I don't take it in.
I think many people can relate to that, because that is a common theme that I see in lots of the women's groups that I belong to for business, that there's just so much to do, and where do you go and where do you look, and just the feeling of looking for direction. And it sounds like, you know, looking inwards versus looking outwards has led to some really great introspective and probably decision-making moments in your life.
And they're in finding your own playbook. And remember, I love blog posts. I'm an avid reader. I read every newsletter I can, try to absorb and learn, because I'm curious George. I'm a worker bee learner. Like, that's what drives my engine. However, the playbook that works best is the one that I've constructed for myself. Right. And, you know, owning that, Miss Independent, who always wanted to be independent, well, then lean into your own desire to be independent, create your own playbook. It's not like Sonia's or Amanda's or Alexis's or Bonnie's. It's not. It's my own. And I iterate it all the time. You know, I really do. And that is very entrepreneurial. The entrepreneurial factor is understanding there is no perfection, starting with you, and that all products, all services, all businesses, all processes are as good as they are. And then they can get a little bit better if you lead that process of getting it better for yourself and for your employees every day. So all the language around entrepreneurship is very dear to me. And it's not high growth venture backed necessarily. It's any business of any type run by a solopreneur or a team. The language is similar, because if you don't have growth generally in your mind as a possibility, it will not come true. If you're not willing to learn new things, growth will not occur. If you're not willing to break things and experiment things, stop things and start things, you won't get better. These are fundamentals. And there's no one book, and there's no one blog post, and there's no one anything for that to be, to be right for you. I think you have to create that over time.
So thinking back to what you've done both for yourself as an entrepreneur, the other businesses that you've helped launch through venture capitalism, the boards that you've been on, can you distill that down for those of us here on this call of what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen entrepreneurs make? What are the biggest successes you've seen entrepreneurs undertake? And what would be some of your best words of wisdom for this group? And before you answer, if you don't mind, I just want to remind the group that we're going to be taking questions at the end of this call. So if there are things you want to ask Wendy, she has graciously said no topic is off limits. I have a couple more questions for her, but then we're going to open it up to you guys. So
yeah, I'm excited about the questions. So let's don't run out the clock. I don't want to babble on, but let me go to this board work. I currently serve on 6 or 7 boards. And when I started being on both venture-backed boards, public-private boards, corporate boards, that's when I really had a chance to step back and learn at a deeper level, because it's the responsibility of the board member, right? To look at the overall business and the leadership team and just to see how that all works together. And it has been wildly important to me to be on boards and to be able to imagine, including my own. I've always served on my own boards as a CEO. I've kind of demanded that, and VCs don't always, not everyone loves that. When you want to be a board member, even a nonprofit, they don't want you to be a board member. They want you to be the executive director. But here's what I would say. The most significant successes I've observed being on a board has to do with leveraging partnerships and how to really deploy capital, no matter how much or how little, because that's judgy, right? Because a little might be a lot to some people, and sometimes too much is a problem. But I have been fascinated watching other CEOs and their teams grow through alliances, through channel partners. I mean, that is high leverage work, and it's very tricky. And so not every business should do that. I'm not saying it should be a strategy for every business, but when a board and a team can really understand the partner landscape that provides leverage for the product or service that's being discussed, that the board member is serving on, I mean, it's amazing to watch, right? And it's not just, go build a relationship and see how they're doing. It's so much more complex than that. It's very complex work being good partners, understanding each other's expectations, delivering on something specific before you overcommit to something large. So I would encourage every small business owner on this call to stop and reflect, even just be in it for 15 minutes after this call and think, how could I leverage partners in growing my business? And very important. And so that's a big success I've seen. And then on the money side, I've seen success and failure. Usually the failure is people think small. They're like into itsy bitsy worries. Well, I'm not sure if I can invest that $2K in an ad campaign. Like $2K. I mean, these are very small businesses I work with, right? Okay. These are not venture-backed businesses I work with anymore. I'll come to the disaster of a venture-backed business. But the disaster on a small business is people just think small. And I wonder why. If any of you on this call could understand the size of the prize, right? Like if you're trying to acquire new customers in a segment, and you know the value of having even 10% of those new customers is X. Let's say it's $100,000, right? But you don't have them now, right? So if you can kind of get in your head of analytics and say, okay, I want N number of new customers, and if I can land those, that's $100,000, and that's a material amount of money in my business. That means I can hire another person or whatever. Well, then 2,000 is no problem. You see what I'm saying? But if you don't contextualize the investment of that capital, and again, I'm talking a small amount because this is the kind of business I deal with in my own world. I mean, then it's going to freak you out, right? You're going to be overwhelmed, but that is not a hard decision. If you have confidence in what you're selling, if you have confidence in yourself and what you're selling, you're going to invest 2,000 all day long to potentially get 10% of a big market. Let's say that's 100,000. So I find that a problem.
It is.
I don't know that it's a
female
skill.
problem. Yeah, I think it's a skill that, unless you've been there before and have had to do that, you don't necessarily think in those ways. And not to necessarily, I didn't intend to, but a plug for Energize Colorado. Would that be something that some of the volunteers at Energize Colorado are available to help with? Do they have volunteers that will help you with that kind of strategic business planning?
Yeah. And we do have mentors that are functionally excellent across a range of areas. Okay. And planning would be one of them. I wouldn't even call this strategic planning, though. I think that's a little overkill. Okay. I think this is just having a marketing assessment around growth, right? If you want, again, to grow 10% of what? What are you willing to invest to get that 10%? And these are analytical skills. And yes, I would encourage people to go to energizecolorado.com and look at the mentorship tab and see if we can help you, because that's our job, number one. And I do think, though, that that's a little example, right? But it's an important one, because if you're not willing to make some investments, and it could be $500. It doesn't have to be $2,000 to grow. I think there always will be a challenge, right? There will always be a challenge. And you'll say, well, I don't have $2,000. Well, then that's where credit cards come into play. And I don't want to be cheesy about that, because most small businesses in the beginning, that's how we fund ourselves, is we fund it on credit cards. Or we go and get a grant, or we go and get lucky to get a loan. But in the beginning, in my businesses, that's how I did it. All I had was a credit card, and I had a credit limit that wasn't very awesome. But that's how you get started. And I didn't always make good choices, so I have to accept that as this independent woman. But I at least could assess the opportunity to pursue growth in some way.
So on that topic of finances, like, as we've hee-heed about, Mississippi being the poorest in the country. So you came from, not a very wealthy upbringing to, you've done very, very well for yourself. Oftentimes when people come out of upbringings that revolve around poor money habits or not enough money, or you watched your parents struggle, you grow up with these financial chains you put on yourself, and often don't feel, you feel weird about making a lot of money, or it just doesn't feel right to you. This is something that I've heard from many women that I've talked to, that they just, as much as they want to have money and wealth, they struggle with feeling like they deserve it and that they can accept it. So what did you do in that arena? Did it just come naturally to you, or was there actually work you had to do on yourself?
No, I had to do work. I was pitiful. I would describe it now, my more enlightened self, as having a complete scarcity complex, right? Not an abundance. I didn't think about abundance, even with my mother being who she was and saying we could do anything, anytime. I mean, she never created any constraints or restrictions, just the opposite. But in my mind, I had to redecide my financial possibilities. And, you know, I mean, my dad never made more than 25, 30,000 in his whole life, but I don't think I even knew that. So I can't blame it on him, right? I just think somehow my soul and my being decided that I was only worth so much. And I don't even know why. I mean, but I had to decide at 30. I made a decision at 30 and got help at 30 to say, why am I that way? Why do I coil up and retreat? Why do I not feel abundant, or whatever the cool words were at the time? And it's somehow I had decided that this is how much I was worth, and I was going to be a salesperson and not going to be the sales manager or the CEO. I made all these decisions. Who knows why? And then I had to redecide them, but it was very conscious. I invested time and money to do it. It was the best thing I ever did for myself. And I brought my brother too. And it was really amazing. And it was a simple workshop, right? And it seemed like it was very expensive, but it really wasn't now. But I had to really work on that. So I'd encourage all of you who hit that wall, you know, that you know you're hitting it and you wonder why, go and engage in resources that will help you shift that. And that could be an individual therapist. It could be a workshop on prosperity. It could be lots of different, you could read a book, you can listen to a tape, but if you think you have it, you do. And it's not going to resolve itself until you take action. Now, this is an action-oriented human you're listening to. So I do not sit back. I do not pout. I just don't. I just work through it. And sometimes it's hard and it's a slog, but my way of healing is moving forward, experimenting and learning and doing. That's my way of healing, not always reflecting and writing. I do some of that, but I have to heal in a walking meditation form.
Understandable. So with all that you know that's going on with entrepreneurship in the state of Colorado. I mean, I think it's fantastic. Is it what 92 businesses and 92% of businesses in Colorado are small business? Is that correct?
95% of our economic tax revenue comes from a small business.
Fabulous.
And
so
that's a lot. We're very dependent on the success of the small business sector.
Right. And so since you are so involved with all of that on many, many levels, if you were standing in front of an audience of all of us small business people, what would be your best advice right now? Where do you see things going for us? What do you think would be the best things we could do for our businesses to ensure growth and success?
Yeah, great question. And now I'm going to speak on behalf of the state, even though I don't work for the state. So let's be clear. The first thing I would do is I would go to the governor, like the OEDIT's website, okay. Office of Internet, what is it? OIED, I can't even spell it. Economic Trade, International Trade. Right. It's the Jobs Colorado website, but it's really about our particular version of that, the Office of International Economic Development and Trade. Let me say it right, for God's sake. Otherwise, the governor will be very upset with me. OEDIT. I just call it OEDIT. Now, let me tell you why I'd go to that. Because of the stat that Sherry just shared, that there are enormous amount of resources available to small business owners. And it absolutely makes me sad to know that small business owners are not taking advantage of them. And this is not just the SBDCs. That's one piece of the puzzle, and a very important piece of the puzzle, because they have amazing resources. But there are so many. There's the Minority Business Office. There's PTAC, which helps small businesses get contracts with federal and state government. There are so many. Now, honestly, I didn't know how many there were before I started this work. Now I do. And if you go to there, if you need access to capital, if you need access to digital, if you need access to employees, workforce support, that is the go-to page. Now, on top of that, There are organizations like ours, Energize Colorado, who've built programs to supercharge or supplement or complement those that the state offers. And so we try to fill very specific gaps that we don't see being addressed, especially for very small businesses, 25 employees or less, women, BIPOC, rural, and veterans. But really, going to the OEdit website is the most important one. And maybe, Kanita, if you could drop that website in, or Rebecca into the chat, so people don't have, if they don't know about it, they can get to it quickly. That would be helpful, because that should be the starting point. And then from there, organizations like ours, RMMFI, Mikasa Resource Center, there are 350 organizations across the state that support small businesses. That's a lot. And the challenge is which one to go to, right? Which one makes the most sense? So we're trying to do a better job of exposing all of them through our website, through our resource compass, which Kanita Snow, who's on the call, leads. But this is where to go to help. You asked me, Sherry, early, where do you go to help? Forget help. Start there. And if there's any question about it, come to us first, because we want to make sure small businesses, especially women-owned small businesses, get what they need as quickly as possible. Please.
Fabulous. Okay, last question before I open it up to everybody. Your failures in business.
Oh my gosh, I have so many.
But here's my big question for you, because we all face our failures. What strength did you have not only to keep going, but to try again? Because I think that's where a lot of people say, this just isn't for me. I can't do this. Was it something that you feel was inherent in you? What gave you that confidence and the trust in yourself to say, I failed, I'm not a failure?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So my demon is around disappointing people. And so my biggest failure surrounded disappointing venture capitalists after raising, I don't know, $40 million from them. And I was not able to deploy that capital in a way that met or exceeded their expectations. And when I could not get the growth from that capital that they expected and were very clear about, so there was no confusion. When I was not able to make that happen as a CEO, then we had to sell the company. And this was looking for a soft landing. This is not selling to get a return on capital. It was the hardest thing in my life. And that was happening at 55 years old. So in Silicon Valley. So strap that one on. So what allowed me to get through that horrible, in my mind, failure, because I disappointed my investors, was to keep going. And what I mean by that is I stayed very active in the sale of that transaction, right? Very active. I developed relationships on behalf of the new company so they could make sure could begin again. I helped the employees that I had to lay off. And this wasn't a few, this was a lot. So I decided one way to be active and work through my grief and disappointment and sadness and sense of failure was to help them find jobs. And so I became an executive recruiter, not really, but I decided to help them because they were talented people. And I, of course, felt like I failed them. And I did in some ways, but they were startup people. They didn't care. They're like, okay, whatever, we'll find a new job. We'll keep going too. So the energy of staying involved, not putting my tail between my legs. Oh my God, I'm so sad. Not hiding, but staying in it, facing it every day, working with it every day. That's my independent spirit. That's my curious storage, because I'd never been in a transaction that was on the other side, on the downside, right? I had no idea some of the things they were even talking about. So that's how I did it, is I found the strength to stay in it, to move through it, even though there were days that were very hard. And then I took a big new job after that was completely different. right? It was completely different. That's when I moved to Ohio. So, you would think, oh, well, now she's going to retire because she's 60. Oh, she's going to go to the beach or whatever. She's going to write a book. No, none of that. I moved from San Francisco to Cincinnati, Ohio to begin again in a completely new body of work that did leverage my successes and failure in the past. And now I'm still doing that work. So think about that. Like beginning again is a real big deal in my life, especially given my independent spirit. So I hope that's helpful.
Definitely. It sounds like you looked for the way to make the best of a bad situation, and that helped you pull through it because you also look to help others as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, everybody, it is now your turn. If you look at the bottom of your screen where it says how many participants, chat, and so forth, you're going to see a button that says reactions. You can click on that and there's a little option to raise your hand. So if you have a question for Wendy, feel free to raise your hand. Wendy, I'll leave it up to you as hands pop up of anybody you want to call on. And if nobody has questions off the top of the head for you, we can continue chatting ourselves. But actually, I think we've already got some hands up.
Okay, now I can't see the hand, so maybe we should go to full gallery.
If you want to, I'm scrolling through. I see Abigail first, so we can start with her.
Okay, let's do it. Abigail.
Abigail, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes. Thank you so much, Wendy.
You're welcome, Abigail.
I can't begin to say how you have impacted my whole business, the spirit, and the power I've used to get into it. God bless you for all this that you've been doing for us small businesses. But I like you to talk more about leveraging partners. I know it's important, but also there is still that reservation of, oh, how do I get a good partner? Because I mean, I've heard horrible stories of partners, what could happen. So is there kind of like a good strategy to be able to leverage partnership? If you could talk more about it and kind of give us guidance. I don't mind is there a coach who helps you to make sure you get the right partner? Because getting a good partner is also key.
Yeah, no, thanks for asking, Abigail, and thanks for joining the call today. So there are a number of models, of models that I've used over the years that have helped me think about very simple constructs like, what is your core product? What do you need around your core product to augment it, to differentiate it? How would you take it further to even an extended product? And then rather than building those augmented and extended layers to differentiate your core product, find a partner to do that. And so then you have to be real clear once you think about your whole product, your core, your augmented and extended, then think through what you really need from them and what you might be able to deliver to them. That mutual value proposition, as simple as it sounds, is an important first step. Because if you can't articulate that, likely you will not be able to get into the right conversation, right, to even position your value to them. So I think thinking through the whole product model, thinking through mutual value proposition would be two good places to start. And you and I know each other, so you can email me and I can send you some other models that would be very easy for you to pace yourself through. So when you're having a dialogue with a partner or when you're trying to decide which ones make sense, I think these tools will be good for you to leverage.
Great. I will email you then. Definitely.
Okay, thanks, Abigail. Great to see you.
Yes, good to see you.
Okay. Anybody else have a question for Wendy? You can go ahead and put your hand up and we'll get you unmuted.
Sherry, there's a question in the chat. Would you like me to read it?
Sure, thanks.
Great. So Wendy, this question is, what role did mentors play in your success? Where did you find them and how often did you engage with them?
Okay, good question. In the early days, remember, I'm an elder. In the early days, there were no such things as mentors, right? I mean, there were just people in your community that you respected. The first time I really grokked a mentor, though, was in my 30s. And that's when I was selling services to very large tech companies. And I was in the business of working with very, very, very smart people. And oftentimes I would go to them, even though in some cases they were clients or they were students in sessions and workshops that I was delivering. And I would go out to them and ask if they could give me their point of view, or that they could provide some help on a certain problem that I was having. So to be candid, I think many on this call, many of you are close to your clients. And I think in that way, you can look to them to exchange value with you around specific areas of interest without exposing everything about your business. And I would encourage you to do that. Good relationships make good business. So I do think that that's part of the opportunity you have finding mentors. But now in 2022, there are mentorship networks everywhere. And in fact, Energize Colorado not only has one, but our community is all about mentoring each other. And those that have invested their precious time, energy, and skills in Energize Colorado know that part of what we love to do is make sure we're connecting those that need help, not so much as a formal mentor or coach or business advisor, but just generally speaking across our community. That's part of what builds a strong community, is helping each other in any area that they need help in. So that's how I'd respond to it. Mentors are a big part of my life. And I'm so thankful that I have many today. I have a whole board of mentors that support me in many different ways.
So Wendy, what's next for you?
Oh, don't ask that question, because I have so many secrets.
Okay,
No.
well, the secrets, keep your secrets, but the ones that you can publicly talk about. I know.
No. Well, first of all, this work during COVID has just put me in such an amazing frame of mind, even though it's really been hard, as we all know. But I try not to say it's hard all the time. What it's done for me, and what it's shown me is just the opportunity to really double down across the US on the small business sector. Now, we have an amazing leader of the SBA. So I'm not trying to say that's what I want to do or will do, but I'm just saying I want to be the advocate, an active advocate for the small business sector. Very small, 25 employees or less, typically financed on their own money or on the growth of their own business, meaning from customer revenues. So what I'm most excited about is taking all the learnings on the policy side, all the learnings on the capital side, all the learnings on the program side, like I mentioned that you should look at on the OEdit website, and really leverage those to make sure they're brought to a wider audience, even more small businesses in our state. Let me be specific. We have 20 some odd people on this call. We have 250,000 small businesses in our state with 25 employees or less. So I'm loving that you guys took your time to come here. Thank you for that. It makes me feel proud and happy. But think how many people are not here. So we need to do more work advocating for very small businesses, because they are the foundation of the nation's economy as well as the state's economy. So I'm pretty jazzed about that. Energize Colorado has encouraged me to continue to think about expanding the reach of this program. So I'm going to leave it at that, Miss Sherry Mitchell.
No, I love it. I love it. I knew that you had, you said that you committed to Energize Colorado for 4 years. And, again, as we've spoken of, you are driven and see no reason to stop doing what you're doing. And you're always looking for growth and challenge. And so it's always that'll be exciting to hear what might be on your horizon. So,
Yeah.
but we are approaching the top of the hour. I can't thank everybody enough for taking your time out of the day to be here with us. It's always such a pleasure to see your faces and to know that you guys are out there investing in yourself to make you and your businesses even better. So we hope you got a lot out of this conversation. Wendy, thanks so much again for giving us an hour of your time. Always a pleasure to learn from the best, and you're definitely in that group.
Okay, thank you, Sherry, very much. And a shout out to Women-Owned Business, part of Energize Colorado, to all of you guys who've stayed involved in that particular part of our entity. So Sherry, thanks for your leadership role, and thanks for Kenita Snow and to Rebecca Engel and to Maisie, who's just joined us, Energize Colorado, for joining today, and for all of you who invested precious time to listen to my story. I hope it was helpful. And if not, drop me a note and we'll see if we can't make it better next time. See you later.
See y'all later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.